We've got an incredible tale of adventure to share with you on Northwestern Outdoors Radio this week. We're talking to Nick Burson and Marc McPherson. They live in central Washington near Ellensburg, and they did something that I've never heard of anybody doing before. They summited 5 mountains, 5 volcanoes in Washington State in 5 days, and they're here today to tell us about it. Nick, Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Nick, let's go ahead and start with you. When I first heard about this, I assumed you were professional mountain climbers. Nothing could be further from the truth. Why don't you tell our listeners what the two of you do for a living?
We're both police officers.
And where do you work, and where does Marc work?
I work for the Cleveland Police Department, and Marc works for Central Washington University Police Department.
Talk about being in great shape. No donuts for you two. I'm very impressed that you were able to accomplish this. Again, Mount Rainier is over 14,000 feet. Even the small one, Mount St. Helens, is well over 8,000 feet. So you guys put in a lot of elevation in a hurry. How did the two of you come up with the crazy idea for doing 5 volcanoes in 5 days?
Well, we first came up with the idea in 2015 after we summited all 5 in a season. And then last year we did a 230-mile backpacking trip and climbed a couple mountains on the way to include Glacier Peak. And we just had to top last year. So it started out as a 7-day trip, and due to logistics and we were just cruising, it turned into 5.5 days.
Impressive. All right, so Marc, I got to ask you, 5 mountains in 5 days. Did you contact Guinness and see if this is some sort of world record? Because it sure sounds like it ought to be one.
No, I did a little bit of internet research to see if anybody had even ever done it before, and haven't come up with any results. I haven't mined Guinness yet. Not sure if it would be or could be, but it might be worth looking into.
Well, I hope you do. I suspect it probably will be a record. Again, I've never heard of anybody doing this before, and it's physically an incredible achievement. Let's go ahead and break down the journey. Again, 5 mountains in 5 days. You started south, worked your way north. Tell our listeners about the first 3 mountains you scaled and how long it took to do that.
Well, we started out at Mount Adams, I think a little bit after 8. I don't remember the exact time. And the plan was to climb Adams and get up top for sunrise. I don't think anything in my mountaineering repertoire is anything better than a sunrise on the summit. And so we kind of were joking with each other back and forth, and it turned into, well, if we get up on top of Adams for sunrise, what's to stop us from getting on top of St. Helens for sunset? So that kind of became the goal, and as it turns out, we ended up on top of St. Helens long enough before sunset that we weren't willing to stick around and wait for it. We actually made much better time than we thought we would and got the sunset just before tree line. It started to go down. As a matter of fact, I don't even think we needed headlamps until we got back to the campsite.
Now, Marc, I know a lot of folks are thinking, okay, well, you climbed 2 hills, but let's talk about how high these hills are. How much elevation gain did you have to hike up to get to the top of Adams? And same question for St. Helens.
For Mount Adams, the total gain, I believe, is about 6,600 feet. Mount Adams is 12,276 feet in elevation. It's arguably the 3rd highest in the Cascade Range. Mount Shasta has an offshoot, Shastina. If you count that as a separate volcano, then it takes 3rd. And then, call exactly what the gain is on St. Helens. I just remember that we were looking at about an 11,000-foot day if we were to get them both done, which is, at that time, bigger than anything we had done before.
And that's just the first 2. So that's day 1. I hope that you overnight somewhere, and did you just start the next morning up Rainier?
When we got back down to Climbers Bivouac, Mount St. Helens, which is the trailhead, we had set up camp. We had a friend that was going to go with us, and he got sick on Mount Adams. He had been fighting a cold. He made it up Adams, but he had to bow out for St. Helens, so we met him back down there. We camped overnight, had a nice leisurely breakfast because we didn't want to start too soon on Rainier. And then after we left camp, we dropped him off with a ride at Packwood because he just didn't want to be a third wheel. So he took off there. We continued on to Mount Rainier and got going a little bit before 5 p.m.
That's a little late in the day to be scaling Mount Rainier. What time did you get to the summit there? I mean, first you have to get to Camp Muir. Did you actually do it all in one shot?
We did do it all in one shot. We've done that twice before, and it seems to work out a little bit better for us. When you go in one shot, you don't have to carry a lot of the camping gear, And I find it hard to sleep anyway at altitude. And so I usually end up at camp just wide awake, wondering what I'm doing, why I'm here, how silly I am. And then you get up and go tired anyway. So we timed it that we would be coming into Mirror, hopefully about the same time that teams would be leaving. That way we'd be through the crevasses, up the glaciers, about regular time for most other teams.
You're listening to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. We're talking to Marc McPherson and Nick Burson, two police officers from Central Washington who scaled 5 volcanic mountains in Washington State in 5 days. Marc just told you about scaling Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Rainier, but there's 2 more to go. And these 2 are in northwestern Washington. Glacier Peak, that is a rugged peak. Nick, why don't you tell me what happened once you got down off of Mount Rainier and take us through your climb up Glacier Peak?
Well, after Mount Rainier, we were both a little tired, so we took a nap at the truck before we drove the 3 to 4 hours to the Glacier Peak trailhead. And once we got there, we camped for the night. We got up the next morning. I was a little slow getting up out of bed. Marc was gung-ho and ready to go, and we hit the trail. It's about an 18-mile approach one way from the truck to the top of the mountain, and we just set a time that we knew where we were going to camp, and if we made it to that campsite in time that evening, we'd push for the summit that night. That way we didn't have to wake up early the next morning, and we made it well ahead of time, and we summited Glacier Peak before the sun set.
This is incredible, Nick. So let me get this straight. In 2 days, you've summited 3 peaks. You wake up on day number 3, and now you're heading up Glacier Peak after an 18-mile hike. Is that 18 miles to the summit, or is it 18 miles plus more to get up to the top of the mountain?
It's about 18 to the summit.
Wow. And so did you come down that night?
We did. We came down to about 7,600 feet where we had camp.
So most people would have been pretty much done for like a month after just climbing any one of these mountains. But now you've climbed 4, and I guess we're in the morning of day 4 now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what happens next? There's one mountain to go, the mountain that receives more snowfall than any other in Washington State, Mount Baker.
Well, we woke up kind of late that morning, and we, kind of like Rainier, we didn't want to start too early, so we had breakfast, and then we hiked out the 15 miles back to the truck, and once we got to the truck, we drove to Mount Baker, took a little nap in the truck there, woke up, and started 1 minute after midnight for the summit.
And what was the toughest mountain of the 5 that you summited? Was it Baker because you were so dog-tired by the time you got there?
No, I wouldn't say so. It was probably Mount Rainier. Mount Baker, we were running on adrenaline, and we couldn't believe we were completing this.
I can't either. What was the total mileage and total elevation gain over this 5-day experience?
Total mileage was somewhere in the vicinity of 90 miles, and elevation gain somewhere around 40,000 feet.
Absolutely amazing. Folks, you just heard a mountaineering story like no other I have ever heard of before. Nick Burson, Marc McPherson, 2 police officers, not professional mountain climbers, 2 police officers who decided on their days off to climb 5 mountains in 5 days, and they pulled it off. Nick, Marc, we got to go, but do me a favor. Please contact the Guinness Book of World Records. I'm pretty sure I'm going to find you 2 listed in there once you do. Thank you for sharing your adventure with us today on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Thank you.